Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another edition of Sports Betting 101, Episode 2. Coach Doc back here, ready with y'all, ready to give y'all a game plan for success in sports betting. We're trying to lay out a framework, trying to set you up with a playbook to help you have a real shot at success when it comes to sports betting. So if you're wondering who the heck I am, well, let me refer you back to the intro episode, episode 1, recorded last week. Yeah, you can refer back to there. I'm just kidding, guys. Sebastian Firon here, a.k.a. TheDGenDoc. Yes, this is the second episode of an educational series. Really, I encourage you guys to go ahead and look at the intro video. I will link that definitely down there in the description. But essentially, what I'm trying to do is give you guys a game plan for success when it comes to sports betting. Sports betting is something that has absolutely exploded in these past couple of years. You got all these different legalizations of states. You got companies trying to advertise left and right up the wazoo. It has just gained in popularity. And I get it. I'd sports bet. I've been sports betting for a little while here, around 5 years, and it's definitely exciting. But it's something that you're putting your hard-earned money on. So you have to make sure you know what you're actually doing, right? In order to get good at something, they always say, people who became a master at something, they mastered the basics. You have to start with the basics. And that's what we're talking about today. We are actually going through the basics. We're going to go into really the nitty gritty of kind of what is sports betting and kind of what's a spread, what's a money line, what's an over under, like what am I actually betting on? That is the premise of this episode today. And we're going to actually kick this one off with the golden rule for sports betting. And that is, yes, drum roll, please. There is no such thing as a lock when it comes to sports betting. Now, I'm going to say it again. I'm probably going to say it multiple times, but I know what you're thinking. Oh, come on. Yeah, there's got to be something to lock. There's got to be a guarantee. Well, one, we're talking about sports. Why do we love sports? Because they're unpredictable. Why did the New York Giants play the 18-0 New England Patriots in the Super Bowl? Why even play that game? They were such big underdogs. Sometimes the underdog comes out, right? David versus Goliath. That's why we don't play the game simply on paper and we actually play them on the field, because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, that's in the name of gambling, right? It's a gamble. Sports gambling, sports betting. There is no such thing as a lock. And just to really drive these points home, let's go ahead and use some real world examples as far as what we're talking about here. All right. So Super Bowl just happened, right? Obviously, there was plenty of opinions, thoughts about how people felt about the game. People were like, I have a great feeling about it. There's people saying there's a lock. There was somebody that was so confident that the 49ers were going to win that they bet over $1 million, $1.1 million on the game. That is how confident those were. In their mind, that was their lock of the year, lock of their life, whatever it was. They were willing to put up this much money. And we all know what happened. Mr. Patrick Mahomes himself came in and said, I can't believe y'all made me another underdog and bring me my money. I mean, really, in this case, let's be honest, Vegas was the real winner, right? But all right, let's say, all right, yeah, the Super Bowl, people bet big, whatever. Listen, folks, people are going to come at you with their lock of the day, lock of the year, the best pick they've ever had every time. Just know there's no such thing as a lock, right? You have to be careful here. Let's use an example from just today, right? I'm recording this on Thursday night. So we had, let's look at here. We had a capper out there. He was very confident in his pick, right? He's giving out, hey, Pacific Moneyline. We're going college basketball here, conference tournaments. I think Pacific Moneyline is going to win plus 400. We'll get into what that means and stuff actually in this episode. But basically, this guy said, hey, there's a pretty big underdog, 4-1 underdog, but I think they're going to win. That's my lock today. You want to know how that turned out for those of you who aren't aware? This is the final score to that game. He bet $80 real of his real hard-earned money that Pacific, a 6-win team who is 0-16 in the conference, was going to win this game outright today at a 4-1 underdog. They lost this game by 59 points. I cannot remember when I legitimately have seen two teams in the same league have this big a difference. I mean, look at that halftime score, 56-9. honestly, the fact that Pacific even scored 34 points in the second half is a miracle. I mean, I think the player managers, the guy who does the laundry was on the court for Pepperdine in the second half. I mean, this is absolutely insane. But look, I'm not here just picking on cappers, picking on people, right? It happens to all of us. I have had some locks that I thought, oh, there's no way this can lose. There's no way this can whatever. But it happens, right? You got to know going in that just because in your head that you think it's going to go right, or you hear somebody say, hey, I think that, this is a lock. This is definitely going to happen. There is no such thing as a lock when it comes to sports betting. All right, there's your starting off with your free check-in, your golden rule. So remember that. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Let's go ahead and get into when we talk about sports betting, really, again, the basics. We got to first understand odds, right? What are odds? Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to get into a little bit of math. We're going to do some public math, some math in public, as we say in the military there. So, but don't be afraid. We're going to walk through this. We're going to make it pretty simple, about as simple as can be. All right. So when it comes to sports betting, when it comes to odds, you're basically going to see a minus or a plus next to something. So a minus is going to donate or is going to mean that a team is a favorite. And a plus means it's going to be an underdog, right? So it also is going to correlate to if you bet on them, what your payouts are going to be. But let's go ahead and look at this little chart here. So using my handy dandy friends on the internet to help explain this, right? So, you're going to have some situations where it talks about a favorite, right? So it's a little bit of a safer bet, and it's going to be less of a payout because, Vegas or that sports book is saying that this team is the favorite. So you should not win as much money if that team's going to win because that's the expected outcome. Okay, so you have different ranges. I mean, you could get all the way up to minus 10,000. I mean, you can get crazy here. But if we just start off with, minus 200, right? So that's essentially saying that a team you have to bet $200 to win $100, or you have to bet $20 to win $10, right? That team is, twice as likely to win as opposed to the other team. Whereas if you come on the other side of the spectrum there and you go to plus 200 on your underdogs, right? So if it's got a plus in front of it, that means that team is less likely to win. That is your underdog. So your payout will be higher. So if I put $100 on a team that's plus 200, then I would win $200, right? So I would put the $100 down, I would get back $300. Where if I put, $100 down on this minus 200 favorite, I would only get back $50, right? So that's kind of your minus and your plus there. Essentially, again, the minus, it means that is a favorite, means that your payout's going to be a little less. Your plus is an underdog. The payout's going to be a little bit more. I know what you're thinking. Why wouldn't I just do plus bets all the time? They're underdogs, right? Statistically, they are less likely to win. That is why they're the underdogs. Again, let's not forget Vegas was not made through charity donations, right? They know what they're doing there. But so that is the basic on kind of odds. Again, if it's got a minus sign in front of it, it is a favorite. It is going to be less of a payout. If it's got a plus, it's more of an underdog. So it's something that's going to pay out a little bit higher there. All right, let's go to your 3 basic type of bets now. So we're first going to start off with the most simple bet that you can make in sports betting, and that is a money line bet. So a money line bet is as simple as it can get, right? This is, grandma, grandpa can do this type of bet. So this is just saying that I think that this team is going to win, right? So if I'm betting the money line, all I'm doing is betting that this team will win. It does not matter about how many points. It does not matter how long it takes. It is just I'm betting this team to beat this other team, right? So if we take a look here, we pull up some odds. This is over on DraftKings. Just really pulled a random screenshot. I have no idea when this is even from because it's irrelevant to what we're talking about. But you've got your 3 different games here. If we look at that one on top, that 76ers Hornets game, you see that the Philadelphia 76ers are minus 490 favorites, right? We just learned it's got a minus in front of it. So that means they're favorites, and they are almost 5-1 favorites. So essentially, again, I've got to bet $490 to win $100 if the 76ers win. Or you could also do that as $49 to win 10, however you want to kind of do it. But that is kind of how that reads, right? And then if you want to go down to the next game, right? So, or if we stick to that game, actually, because you can bet the money line on a favorite or an underdog. Again, this is just you are picking a team to win. Then, the Hornets, they're plus 390 underdogs, right? It's almost 4-1 odds that they're a little bit less than 4-1 odds that they would win the game. Vegas thinks this is pretty unlikely. So if I bet $100 on them, I would win $390, right? The plus, again, dictates that they're going to be an underdog in this game. So that is what we're doing there. And so on and so forth. We obviously have the Wizards are your underdog, your Cavs are your favorites, and then the Warriors are the underdogs, and your Hawks are the favorites in that game. So hopefully it's starting to make a little bit more sense, right? So again, money line bet is as simple as it can get. It is just who is going to win the game, right? If you don't want to be worried about, hey, I don't want to worry about final score. I don't want to worry about how many points are scored or how many goals, this and that. I don't want to worry about how much they win by. I simply want to pick what team is going to win that game. Then you want to place a money line bet. It is your most simple bet that you can place in sports betting. And again, we're working on the basics, right? So this is exactly where we're starting. That's why I wanted to start there. Celebrating over here. So after each one, I'm going to be taking and celebrating a drink as we're learning, right? Shout out to education. All right, let's keep rolling here through this. So we did our money line. We explained the odds a little bit. We spent the golden rule, which is no such thing as a lock, right? So let's go ahead and do the next type of bet. That is a spread bet. So when you're betting on the spread, this essentially is when you start to take into account how many points a team wins or loses by, right? So what the sports books did, instead of just having everybody bet on who would win and lose, because again, you have a situation where if we pull this back up, you've got let's see here. You got the 76ers, who are pretty big favorites, right? They're almost 5-1 favorites. So in a lot of scenarios that it's played out, the 76ers win this game. That's, can get a little boring. Not everybody wants to have to lay a lot of money to win, or doesn't want to just bet on this. So in order to level the playing field a little bit, they created something called a spread. So a spread is essentially how many points that team is getting, how many points the favorite has to win by in order to win that bet, right? So essentially what Vegas is saying, or what the sportsbooks are saying, is, they think that this team is this many points better in this situation, in this specific game. This team is going to win by X amount of points, right? So they're setting a line. So that line for this game at the top, the 76ers Hornets game, is minus 10.5. So they're basically saying that I think that, the 76ers are 10.5 points better than the Hornets, right? And so now, whatever one you fall on, as far as, hey, I think the 76ers are going to win by more than 10.5 points, which means they have to win by 11 or more, right? You can't win by half a point in basketball. Then you would go ahead and bet the 76ers side of that spread. If you think the Hornets are going to play tough, stick around, and not lose by at least 10 or more, right? So if they're going to lose, if they're only going to lose by 10 or less, I should say, then you want to go ahead and bet on the Hornets side of the spread. So I understand a little bit more confusing, right? So the way I like to think about it is essentially 76ers. We already know that they're the favorite because they have the minus side in front of them, right? They're minus 490 favorites, so they're pretty big favorites. With the minus 10.5, essentially they are starting the game with minus 10.5 points, right? And they have to break that even point in order for you to win that bet. So if let's play out some scenarios, right? Let's say I'm on the 76ers and I don't want to bet the money line. I don't want to, lay all that money, that 490 to win 100. Let's say I want to just $100 on them to win by minus 10.5, right? So I am betting $100 that the Philadelphia 76ers win this game by more than really 11 points, right? Because again, can't win by 10.5 in basketball. So let's say final score comes out and it's 76ers 120, Hornets 110. Now, money line situation, I'm good. 76ers won. I'm happy, right? Probably didn't make a ton of money, but I won the bet. In the spread situation, you would lose this bet. So even though the 76ers won by 10, they did not win by 11 or more. So you did not cover that number, right? They didn't win by, at least 11. So actually the Hornets would have covered that number, right? So they only lost by 10. Now, if the Hornets, the Hornets could win, they could win by any amount in the world and they could lose up to 10. But if the game was 121 to 110, then it's flipped. Now my 76ers spread bet would win and the Hornets bet would lose, right? So that's kind of working into the spreads. Understand it's a little bit more complicated, but I like to just think about it. Hey, that favorite is spotting this many points in the game, right? So essentially, if you go down to the next one, the Cavs minus 5.5, the Cavs are starting at minus 5.5, and they have to get above that number. So they have to win by 6 if you're going to bet on them, right? So as you see here, that kind of minus 110, as we go back up to that top game, that is kind of your standard, what you're going to get, right? The standard lines that you're typically going to see. So that is, we wish that what it would really be great is if it was plus 100, because it'd be even money. It'd be like, hey, I'm betting on this thing and I'm going to get this in return. But again, it's Vegas, right, folks? Vegas was not built to have all these Super Bowls and have all this money and things like that. Was not built on charity and handouts. It was built on the backs of people like you and me losing money. So we have to understand that minus 110 is essentially the books taking a little bit of a rake, a little bit of what we call a VIG. So they're essentially securing profits on both sides, right? Because minus 110 would tell me that if I bet $100, I only win 90. I would have to bet $110 to win 100. I'd have to bet $11 to win 10. However you want to kind of shake that out, right? So that is kind of where you'll see that. You'll see that minus 110 typically more than anything else. And that's why they have those spreads to kind of even it out in the middle a little bit there. So that also tells us that in order to really be a profitable sports bettor, it's not as simple as, if I bet every spread or whatever, I need to be hitting it higher than just your 50% rate. Typically, again, if you're talking about someone who's betting mostly minus 110s, which is again the most common thing you're going to see, then you want to be, in order to be a long-term profitable bettor, you have to be hitting around that 52, 53%, right? So it makes it again a little bit harder. You don't walk into a casino and think the odds are for you, right? This is the same thing with sports betting. Again, it is not impossible to win money sports betting long term, but it is difficult. There's a reason that most people can't do it, right? And that is why we are learning the basics, because again, in order to become great at something, no matter what it is, you have to master the basics. And that's what I'm trying to help you guys do, trying to help you guys understand, because again, I'm not saying I know anything. I'm not saying I'm a master, but I've been in your guys' shoes as far as new to the game or maybe interested in trying to get into it. But there wasn't a lot of advice as far as, can someone walk me through this? Like, how does this really work? Because, I don't want to, any mistake you make is essentially you losing money, right? And we work hard for money. So we don't want to have to lose that for no reason. So that's why we're going over the basics here. So that is your spread bet, right? So we talked about our money line. Money line, simple. Who wins the game, right? Spread bet. Now we're talking about, bringing the spread into it is how much do they win by? Do I cover my number or do I not cover my number, right? All right, let's go to the other type of bet we're talking about is over under, right? So we're going to use a pretty simple example, but now we're talking about, I don't care who wins the game. Don't give a shit who wins or loses, right? We are simply talking about the points in the game. So over under the total amount of points in a game. So they're, depending on what the line is, they'll set a line of what that number is. And then you just have to try to say if it's going to go over or under, right? So it's a lot easier to explain this with a real life example. So that's what we're going to do instead of me just rambling on here. All right. So when you open up your sports book or sports betting app or whatever, this is typically what you'll see. So obviously for those that are football fans and recognize, this is the Super Bowl 2 years ago. You had your Los Angeles Rams against the Cincinnati Bengals in LA there. So if we can do a quick recap, right? So favorites in the game, guy with the minus sign, Los Angeles Rams, minus 200, 2-1 favorites, right? Had to bet $200 to win 100. They also have a spread of minus 4.5, right? So again, the minuses will line up as well as the pluses. So your Rams are spotting 4.5 points, right? They start at negative 4.5, and they have to go above that in order to cover that number. They got to win by 5 or more, right? For those that remember, they won by 3, so it didn't happen. Won the money line, didn't cover the spread. All right, irrelevant to what we're talking about here. We're talking about that middle block, O48 or U48, right? Over 48 points or under 48 points. So this one's pretty simple. I think it's a little less complicated than a spread bet, but it's essentially saying, do you think there's going to be over 48 points or there's going to be under 48 points in the game, right? So, I mean, this is just straight math. Doesn't really matter how it gets there. In most of these situations, I definitely in football, but it doesn't matter when it gets there, whether it requires overtime or not. If you're just betting the normal over under, you're simply saying, I think there's going to be X amount of points, right? So sometimes, this could absolutely be a play as far as, hey, I think that let's say that when you're thinking about things like you're trying to script things out in your head, right? Because that's typically what you want to do with sports betting. Again, there's plenty of reasons why people want to get into sports betting. I just want to have a little bit of fun and kind of make a game more interesting. Or, hey, I think I know something about this sport. I want to kind of use my edge, use my knowledge to maybe make a little money, right? So you're trying to game it out, right? Game plan it out. So let's say, like, going back to the Super Bowl example, I think that both these defenses are going to step up. I think it's the Super Bowl. These teams are going to be a little bit nervous. You got some guys playing in their first ever Super Bowl. It's a big deal, right? You train your whole life to get to this point, get to this accomplishment. Let's say I think they're going to be a little nervous. I think the defenses are going to step up. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and bet on that under 48. So again, as long as the game ends in any combination of both teams under 48 points, right? That could be something crazy like 3-2, field goal and a safety, or 20-24, or 23-24, right? Puts you at 47 points. You're good. Now let's say, hey, I think these offenses are going to be hot. You got Joe Burrow over against Matt Stafford. You got two hot offenses. Give me the over 48 points. I think we're going to have a light it up in the Super Bowl, right? Let's say we get a 35-30 game or something like that, right? You'd obviously hit that over there. Now, what you do have to be not careful about, but, cautious of, let's say that the game ends, let's say it ends 22-26, right? I don't even know if that's really, it's probably unlikely, but whatever. This is easy math, what I'm doing, right? 22-26, right? So what does that put us at? Puts us right at 48. So this is what we call a push, right? So a push just means you simply refund, right? I get my money back. Push can be bad or good depending on how you feel. If it's something like you were losing the entire game and then you just get saved and kind of get pushed out, you kind of feel like it's almost a win. If you were winning the whole game and then something happens at the last minute and you kind of feel like you got robbed, either way, a push is a push, right? It's not really a win or loss. You didn't lose money. You didn't gain any money, but you didn't lose money. So, I mean, I don't think pushes are the worst thing in the world, right? There's definitely going to be worse things that are going to happen as far in sports gambling. So you kind of take a push there, but that is potentially an over-under, right? So you're just betting over the amount of points or under the amount of points, right? So that's total points for the game, for the match. Again, I'm using a lot of football examples, a lot of basketball, right? Because we're in basketball season. I'm a football guy, so that's where my examples are. But this applies to everything, right? So whether it's ping pong, darts, table tennis, right? Soccer, again, over, under, same thing, right? Money line, same thing. Spread, same thing, right? So this is all universal. That's why it's Sports Betting 101, right? We're just trying to break down the basics for you guys. I'm moving a lot. Whiskey's hitting. All right, so not too much longer. We are going ahead and wrapping up here. Just want to talk about one more thing, one more topic for this night's episode. So we're going to talk about the difference between a straight and a parlay. Now, let's be honest. Some of you guys here were wanting to get into sports gambling, introduced to it because you saw some crazy parlay. You saw somebody, bet like $5 and win like 100,000 or something like that. That, my friends, is the allure of a parlay, right? That is kind of the hook, right? What brings us in, right? And I'll give you a real world example. Then first off, let me say, parlays are fun. I'm not just going to be shitting on parlays because they're a good time, right? It led to one of my highlights of this NFL season. So we'll bring this up. So this was one of my bets here. It was an anytime touchdown parlay, which don't worry, folks, we'll get into all this. You're probably going to sound a little bit like gibberish, right? But essentially, I bet on 4 different guys to score a touchdown. And I bet $18 and I won, over $1,000, right? So, crazy odds, crazy this. I even got like a little bit of a boost, which again, we'll get into, but essentially it was like 56, almost 5,700 to 1 were the odds on this thing. Or 56 to 1 or 57 to 1 were the odds on this thing. So I just want to say that although this was awesome, one of the highlights of my season, right? This is how they get you. This is how they kind of sell the dream and kind of rope you in, right? Parlays are fun. So what a parlay is essentially like in order for me to hit that bet, every single one of those things had to happen. So I bet on 4 guys to score a touchdown. So if 3 out of the 4 scored, too bad, so sad. That $18 turns into 0, right? 1 of the guys, 0 of the guys, 2 of the guys, unless all 4 of those guys scored, $0, nothing, right? So think about that. I thought, in my head, I was thinking, all right, I'd like these 4 guys to score today. Boom, 1 happens, 2 happens, 3 happens. Dang, I'm doing well, right? And then that 4th guy, maybe he gets hurt or maybe he just doesn't score for whatever reason. I just went from, dang, I did pretty good. 3 out of 4, that's 75%, right? And some of these bets, most of those bets were plus money, right? So 3 out of 4, if I would have just bet the parlay alone and I hit 3 out of 4, it doesn't matter. It's like I had 0 out of 4, right? You just get $0 for that. So again, for a parlay, it's multiple bets combined together where every individual leg has to hit. So again, the payouts are bigger, right? Because you're saying that multiple events need to happen in order for this to hit, but it's riskier, right? So straight versus parlay, a straight bet is kind of the ones we were talking about, right? It is just one singular bet. You are betting straight. So let's say you're betting Moneyline, right? I am just betting on this team to win. Spread, I'm betting on this one team to cover the spread. Over under, I'm betting on this one game, right? Parlay is when you combine those differences. You kind of put those different, you need all those different outcomes to hit. So this is mostly to say that parlays are fun. Parlays are a hell of a time, right? They're going to that's how you turn little money into big money. However, again, your odds are going to significantly decrease, right? Don't expect to just go in there and do parlays because we can't predict the future. If we could predict the future, none of us would be here. You'd probably be watching this from a private jet and you probably wouldn't be watching this, right? So you just got to be careful with the parlays because yes, the allure of getting that risk on that big money from like $5 to win like 100 grand or something like that, you're kind of playing the lottery at that point, right? It's just very unlikely. So I'm not trying to be a dream killer at all. Please don't get it misunderstood for that. I do parlays. I bet parlays. Clearly, you see that there. Sometimes they work out. A lot of times they don't, right? The nice thing about some parlays is that if you're strategic about it, I mean, if the odds are nice enough to you, you don't have to hit every time to be profitable. It's just to say it is less likely, right? It's hard enough to try to predict one thing to happen in sports, one event, one thing to whether, it's this team to win or this team to cover or this many points. It's that much more difficult the more legs you start to add. And you can do, 2 situations, a 2-leg parlay up to like a 15, 20-leg parlay, right? You can get obviously berserk with these things. But again, every time you add an extra leg, you're adding an extra outcome that you have to get exactly right. So it's becoming that much more difficult to get to. So let's just finish that off there. But straights versus parlays. Straights are your safe, kind of more traditional conservative betting one game, one situation to happen. Parlay is, hey, a little bit of maybe fun money, a little bit of a small bet. Hey, maybe I think, I feel really good about these 2 or 3 games. Maybe I want to combine those odds, right? Just remember, unless everything hits perfectly, turns into 0, right? So typically you want to make your money in your straight bets. You want to make sure that you're doing mostly straight bets, and then you sprinkle in a little parlays for the fun, right? Because life's short. We don't want to take the fun out of it all the way. But again, you know what's really not fun? Losing money. Losing your hard-earned money is not fun. It's the whole reason I'm doing this, right? Trying to prevent people from losing money. Because again, we talked about it in the last episode, but you got a lot of things against you in the sports betting space, right? You've got Vegas and the sports book. Their whole business model is you losing money. You've got sports cappers out there. People telling you, I've got a lock of the year. I've got a lock of the century, right? I'm going to put $1 million on the 49ers in the Super Bowl. So I'm so confident you should trust me. Look what happened, right? Look what happened. Again, not all sports cappers are bad, but at the end of the day, most of them just want your money. And then again, we got to fight ourselves, right? We got to fight the emotions of these things, okay? It is still gambling. It's still sports betting. We want to be fun. But if you want to actually win money and have a shot at being successful, you got to learn how to control your emotions a little bit. So we're going to get into some of those things. I'm going to have an episode all about dealing with a loss because it sucks. And you got to figure out ways to kind of emotionally deal with that. Make sure you don't like bet right after a loss and try to chase your money and things like that we'll get into. All right. But again, we got to learn the basics before we can master anything. That is anything in life. If you want to have a shot at being successful or being a master or whatever, I don't know if you call yourself a master of sports betting, I think that's just kind of a douchebag thing to do. Just don't say that. But if you want to get good at it, right? You want to be profitable long-term, you got to learn the basics. So I think right now with this second episode, we laid a good foundation as far as the basics. We talked about golden rule of sports betting. No such thing as a lock. We talked about odds. How do I tell someone's a favorite? Someone's what are my payouts going to be? What's going to be an underdog? We talked about Moneyline. I think this team's going to win. I think that team's going to win. Spread, covering your numbers. Again, -5.5. That team has to win by at least 6 or more. Over amount of points, under amount of points, and straight bets versus parlays. So we covered a lot in this episode. I appreciate y'all for sticking with me. Again, as always, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you guys want to hear about, right? Again, this is a new series. It is meant to be educational. It is meant to try to help people. That's what I'm trying to do at the end of the day. I like sports betting. I really enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun. It's something I personally enjoy. But I've also realized that if you're not careful, it's something that can become not fun. It can become addictive and it can become bad for you, right? It can become financially and emotionally pretty bad for you, right? So you definitely have to be cautious about those things. And if we take steps to make sure, hey, I learned the basics, I'm educated on what I'm trying to do, it can be damn fun. And that's all I'm trying to do here is try to make sure that, we're educated, we're smart with our decisions financially, emotionally, we feel good about it, and we have some fun. All right, folks, that is it from me. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next week. This is TheDGenDoc, and I am out of here.